You know, as I grew up and got really connected to media literacy and the things that go on in the world, I became familiar. I think a lot of people aren't aware of this, but I mean, there are people that become famous because they do something really wonderful, and sometimes it's a short-lived fame and then people forget about it. But there's people that pay big money to make themselves famous. I mean, the money that gets paid to radio stations to play the record over and over and over again, so people become familiar and hopefully like it. And people that have a PR agent to make sure they get in the newspaper, because if it's on TV or in the news, then it's real, which of course it's not always real. But when Elaine and I lived in Cedar Riverside, which we did when we were first together, which is a historic part of Minneapolis. Whatever new, it's by the university, and it's kind of a special neighborhood right on the river. And whatever new immigrant group it comes to town, that's where they settle. So in the early 1900s, it was the Swedes and the Norwegians, and these days it's primarily made up of people from Somalia. But we lived there in the for several years. She was actually there before we got married, and we lived there for a number of years before we moved to where we live now. And Elaine was given a job during that time to collect oral histories, to collect stories from people who lived in the neighborhood. And one of the people that she collected stories from was Eddie Berger, a wonderful jazz musician who has since passed away. But he, like many musicians, had struggles with alcohol and drugs. But he when he was sober, sometimes even when he wasn't, he was just the greatest musician, and he taught many of the people that became famous as jazz musicians, and traveled all over. And one of the questions she asked him was, does it ever bother you that that you taught all these people who became more famous and got to travel more than you do? And he paused for just a minute, and he said, no, I think it doesn't. I got past some of the difficulties that were holding me back, and I've got. I mean, well, there was a famous jazz club in town that he was a fixture at. It was like it really sort of was his jazz club. He played there every night that he wanted to, as well as played with other people. And he said, I get to play all the time, and I get to hang out with other jazz musicians. I'm a star in my own saloon. And I mean, I think about that a lot, because it's kind of like when I first started telling stories, and I mean it happened. Well, when I first started, it was whatever I was doing, the camps I was running, and then when I, for a number of years, did school assemblies, and then when I was mainly telling in schools, being a specialist teaching storytelling and video, I'd run into, in the community, some young person, child would come up and say, Mr. Johnson, and then introduce me to the parent they were with, and, talk about the great storytelling. And, maybe nobody else ever knew about that, but it's kind of like being a star in your own school. And I guess it's wonderful school to become so famous that you're, all over the place. But I think that's maybe a trait to aspire to, that because everybody has value and everybody can be a star at whatever they do wherever they are. But it's a little fleeting. I'll put that together with when I was in one of the schools that I was a specialist in for several years. It was the year after Field of Dreams came out, where the baseball players disappeared into the cornfield, and I officially I taught storytelling and video, but I've always been, my content of choice was environment or social justice, and I've always thought that growing a garden is a best way for anybody to learn how to care for the environment. So, I would get if there wasn't one going, and there usually wasn't, get a school garden started wherever I was. And this particular year, the summer before, or I think the summer the movie came out, we planted a corn fence around the garden, as well as the other things that were in there. And I've got a story about my cousin in Bloomington wanting to have a cow in after Bloomington became a city. Bloomington, where the Mall of America is, and they wouldn't let him have a cow because it was now a city. So he planted a corn fence and got a cow and leashed it and taught it to bark, and figured they'd never know the difference. But anyway, when we got back to school, the first week, or one of the first weeks, I built the lesson around bringing the kids out to the garden and just showing them the garden and what we did with it during the year, and then telling that story about the corn fence. And then, because of the movie, using the video camera, a little VHS camcorder, to make some of them disappear into the corn, like in the movie. And then we'd go in and look at that piece of the movie and look at what we just did. And, it's the idea of getting a handle on the even a simple trick with a camcorder makes it look real, but it's not. It's a lot of complex stuff going on there. Well, one of the groups I took out that week, I think it was the kindergarten or first grade group, and I got them all sitting down, and I looked on the grass where I was going to sit, and it looked a little bit like somebody had not picked up after their dog walking through the neighborhood. And I kind of looked at it, and of course, there's a lot going on trying to get the kids settled so that we can do and then I thought, no, it's just a leaf rotting. And so I, I almost unconsciously put my finger into the leaf to make sure it was that, and it wasn't. I was right the first time. It was the dog surprise. And I wiped it off, and nobody said anything. And so I figured it would pass, because I knew that if somebody got what was really going on, it could have broken the place up for 15 minutes out of control. Okay. The day goes by, and last hour of the day, I'm walking in the hallway to wherever I was going, and this little boy, the kindergartners, or that class, was lined up to use the bathroom in the hallway. And that little boy looks up, he says, "I know you. You're the guy that stuck his hand in the doggy do." Fame, maybe not the kind but I guess never lose your whatever sense of humility, maybe. I'm not sure, but that's the way it was that day.